And you came into my office and you were crying and you were just a hot mess. And I was like, yeah, and she's like, I always knew you were gonna do something. I just always knew. And it was just like,
Beautiful.
and she's now got this big practice and downtown
Mhm.
Chicago, the whole thing, but the fact that she remembered, and I totally remember her words. And I'm like, okay, 5 years, I just got to get through 5 years.
Yes,
And, but, for anybody who's listening or watching this, it doesn't even take 5 years.
it doesn't. It doesn't.
You
And it
know,
does it she's right. It becomes a blip on the radar.
yeah,
And the
yeah.
woman that you're elevating yourself to be, to the women, like you said, that are in the thick of it, feel your feels, go through the mourning period, you'll feel it in your bones when you're ready to move, to forgive and move forward. And when that happens, I think the biggest thing for me was fearing that when it came to putting myself out there with the opposite sex, that my picker would still be off, that I wouldn't
Hmm.
trust in myself to make better decisions. But being propelled back into the dating world, I have made better decisions. And there are things that stick out to me now that maybe didn't stick out to me in the past, whether it be a yellow flag or a red one. And I pay attention to what people show me. I think that's the biggest thing is when someone shows you who they are, don't
Yeah.
make excuses for it. Pay attention to it and go with your gut because your gut will always lead you down the right path. You just have to follow it.
Oh, you have to pay attention to it.
You
And
do.
there were, and I want to share this because I think that so often our intuition is blocked, and it's
Yes.
blocked either by our chemistry,
Mhm.
the feel good hormones, the sensual hormones, and obviously this is backed by neuroscience now.
Yep.
But I remember in my 20s when I was going through this particular relationship, I had severe gut issues, like severe. I mean, I couldn't stomach sushi. I had Pepto-Bismol, on my bedside. I had Tums on my bedside. I had a range of things going on. And why? Well, what is happening in your gut? Okay, your gut is your second brain.
It
What was
is.
I suppressing for so long? My gut, my intuition that was like screaming. And I just, like literally, looking back, I'm like, wow, that whole season of not trusting your personal power, your chakras, your energy center,
Mhm.
in your stomach. And yeah, you gave away your power. So of course, you're going to have these, ulcers in your stomach, your food's not going to digest. You're going to have these like cramping, bloating, issues.
Right.
And it was for a period of so many years. And what was interesting was when I left that marriage and, kind of did a whole 360
Mhm.
of, who I was completely, like a full death and a rebirth.
Right.
That was the same time where I was also spending a lot of time really, getting into my full, wellness from
Mhm.
emotional, spiritual, in all of the ways. And it's so connected. So pay attention to even the physical ailments of
Yes.
what your body is trying to tell you.
Yes. I have been currently going through some autoimmune things. And every naturopath I talk to is like, you have just been storing so much stress and trauma in your nervous system that now your
Mhm.
body's finally at peace and it's releasing all of it.
Yeah. Yeah. And
So
it's coming through yeah,
it is.
your system
It is. It
in
is.
the form of inflammation because it has to release.
Yes. Major inflammation. Major inflammation. So, in regards to your book, you have the 5 stage fragments. Can we talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so in the book there's three parts to the book. The first part is, that sucked. Now what?
Right.
The magical moment of suck, basically. Your crappy moment, you're in it. The second part of it is really building your bounce factor.
Hmm.
And I think we kind of talked, a little bit alluding to it. Your bounce factor is kind of like your trampoline. It's what holds you, and it's what literally carries you through any sort of crazy moment, challenge, setback, failure, etc. And then in the third part of the book, we talk about, and I want to go back to, the bounce factor because we just talked about building our intuition, our radical self-awareness, which is the biggest thing. And like you said, getting yourself out there and starting to date because that's building good stress.
Yes.
And it's also building your ability to, yeah, bounce forward, as I like to say in the book, to
Mm-hmm.
build that audacious resilience. But, I also kind of want to share that eh, the audacity of resilience also allows you to be soft
Mm-hmm.
because, you are supposed to even nurture and nourish yourself during this time, right? Because, I mean, you're in many ways you're learning how to walk again.
Mm-hmm.
And so the five stages in part three, it's how to fly forward, how to fly forward through any arena of life. And the first step is, you have that fall. The second step is you're starting to rise. You're starting to rise again. And you're kind of like, all right, maybe you're tiptoeing into new friendships or new situations. I remember when I first got out of my toxic divorce, what was happening was I was like, okay, I'm saying yes to these new things. So the first thing that I signed up for was improv class. And I was deathly afraid of public speaking at the time. I know you would never think that I was,
Not
but
at
I was.
all, Nita.
I was because my voice was shut down in that
Right.
relationship. And so one of my girlfriends, I was heavily into running and cycling. I started doing like triathlons. That was another thing that I said yes to, was improving my swimming. And I talk about that in the book. But all of these different challenges and different buckets of my life, I was like, all right, I'm going to focus in on, and this was okay. Improv scares the crap out of me, but I've always been into comedy because I think for me, comedy was a way, it was a solace, it was a way of like, and of course, now we know all the science and the neuroscience behind it. It activates, your parasympathetic, so it
Yeah.
calms your nervous
It's a
system, you know,
release. Mm-hmm.
your vagus nerve, you're releasing. And goodness, I grew up with so much like sadness and grief in my life.
Yes.
I'm like, the one thing that I could turn to was comedy, was Saturday Night Live, was, all of those things that I feel like I still love and grew up with.
Right.
And so Second City was a big thing in Chicago. And, a recent girlfriend that I had just met at the time in my like running club, she was like, "You got to do this thing with me," and I'm like, "Okay," and it was Second City, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh!" And at the end of this like 8 week course, or it was like 8 weeks or 12 weeks, you had to perform a 5 minute set, and I was deathly afraid, like deathly
I would
afraid.
be too.
But but I'm like, you know what? Okay, what's the worst that'll happen? Like
True.
let's just say yes to
You've
this.
been through the storm and
You
you've
bet
made
you've
it
been through it.
out.
Like what's worse
Can't be
than
worse than
that? And
that.
And let me tell you, that was probably what opened my eyes to the world of speaking, the
Yeah.
world of just like gabbing and libbing, just
Yes.
ad-libbing and having fun. And it was also awakening parts of my inner child and my inner teen. I talk a lot about my inner teen and how to heal your inner teen.
Right.
But, in the ways that I wasn't able to express as a teenager because I was so busy growing up and being parentified and growing up so fast that
Right.
I didn't really have much of that. And so it really, truly unlocked so much healing in ways that I mean, and so going back to, the stages, the magnify stage is when you're really shining
Yes.
and you're allowing yourself to experiment and kind of like for me it was like, oh, I'm meeting new people because
Right.
I'm meeting new friendships because I had to recreate friendships and community because I left a whole toxic load of friends that were, along with that relationship. And it was really a rebirth in many, many ways. And, the thriving, which is that final stage, is all about also being radically true with your boundaries, knowing that if there's going to be a fall again, if you're going to have to go through the rising, again, that yes, you are going to stumble, but it maybe the fall isn't going to be as bad as the very first time
Right.
because you're going to have different tools.
Right.
And I have what's called, my little set of my avatar spiritual warriors, which was like my coach at the time, my therapist at the time, my healer at the time, my body worker at the time. And I
Yes.
still have, a lot of those things in
Oh,
different
yes.
ways.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like that was such a huge part of the reckoning for me. And I really did block out a lot of time to, whether it was different retreats or meditation retreats or, any of those things. And I was doing different books on like attachment and narcissistic codependent stuff, like just all of these things that I was like, all right, who am I becoming in this
Yes.
next version of Neetha that's going to be ready for for her?
Right.
And what's so funny is I decided to then, take a trip to Asia and do my whole eat, pray, love. And I did it,
Oh, I
twice in
love
the next
that.
few years. And I realized that, that kind of opened my eyes to, being a global citizen and starting different businesses and different ventures, because then I started to, be an angel investor and advise other women. And so there was a new career path on the horizon. I didn't know what it was.
Right.
But for any of you watching and listening to this right now, when you start to really thrive and,
Mhm.
magnify and you're flying forward in your life, and that's what the third part of the book is all about. When you're flying forward, you start to realize your dharma. You start to realize that, hey, this can be a calling for me. This
Mhm.
can be an ignition, something that can be my North Star. Maybe I'm meant to teach from, the pain that I've gone through and put that into my purpose in this next season.
Yes.
Because as women, we have different eras, different chapters,
Mhm.
and that is really beautiful. And,
It is.
I'm calling it this is the glow up. This is the
Yep.
glow era. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
It is. It really is the glow era. Well, and another thing that I love so much about your story, Nita, is the fact that you actually found love again.
I did.
And your husband, as I was telling you off camera, your husband is what led me to finding you. So I can thank him and all of his amazing affirmations and quotes that he posts on Instagram. I mean, everybody knows who he is. He's very much a well-known coach that I follow religiously on Instagram. But how did you guys meet? Like, how did this power couple, how did the origin of this power couple begin?
Wow, it's so interesting. Because I was saying yes and I was in my saying yes era,
Uh-huh.
I said yes to a, 3-day conference that was taking place in a different part of the world. It was in Dominican Republic, and it was, I want to say over, I don't know, 12 years ago now.
Okay.
And it was right around the time where I was starting to come out of my shell. I was in an era of life where I was celibate, and so I was just like, all right, yes, yes to new girlfriends, new experiences. This is getting me to travel different places. And so we met in Dominican Republic at this event, and it was an A Fest.
Wow.
And it brought all these people from all around the world that were like these, different entrepreneurs from so many different countries. And we meet, but we're like, I don't know, a few brown people that were at this event. So I'm like, oh yeah, okay, you, yeah, you, cool, and so, but I was obviously newly divorced, and I was just
Right.
like, all my chakras are closed at this
Yes.
point, not open to anything, but I'm open for friendship. And that's the thing. I think for me, I friend zoned a lot of people
Hmm.
for a very, very long time. I mean, I think that that's part of, figuring your own openness, and that's part of your own healing journey, I think. And I
Yes.
think a lot of it is trusting you.
Hmm.
Um, and also doing that inner work, and I know it can go the other way too, because I did go through that season where I was like, hot girl summer, let it
Oh
all
yeah,
out, let's
girl.
go.
Been there, done that myself.
And it's like, all
Yes.
right, cool. Like I wanted to play the both roles, but
Yes.
in this particular season, I was still kind of, shy in that way. And
Right.
so, and he was newly married and I was newly divorced. And we had just, I'm like, okay, we see you. But we stayed friends. And what happened a year later, I was actually going to Burning Man.
Okay.
And a lot of our friends from the year before were also going to Burning Man. A lot
Okay.
of our friends who actually worked together with him,
Right.
and we all kind of go to Burning Man. We create this big bond. He obviously wasn't there. I wouldn't reunite with him until like 2 years later. I would see him
Wow.
again. Yeah. So that's the power of the universe. That's the power. So
Timing.
I'm doing my
Timing
thing
of the
in the
divine
world.
intervention.
Yeah, and like it's not like I was gonna go like he was living in Malaysia at the time. I was
Okay.
in I was in San Francisco, and
Right.
it's not like we knew each other. We knew of each other, right? Because we had only met the one time. And then I decided to do my little eat, pray, love thing when I went to Asia, and I went to Singapore and Bali and then Kuala Lumpur. And I
Right.
realized everyone in Kuala Lumpur looks like me because they're like Indian,
Indian.
Filipino,
Yes.
Chinese. And so they kind of look like me. And I was like, oh my God, I feel like I found my
My
people. Like,
people.
I'm like, what? What is the first time in my life I'm in that part of the world? And so, and yeah, I go to Bali Spirit Fest. He's there again. We actually
Stop.
speak at the same. He wasn't, sorry, he wasn't at Bali Spirit Fest. He was in KL. So I stop over in KL because we're all of our same friends are. So we're literally kind of like one
6
degree
degrees
of
of
separation.
separation.
Yeah, yeah. It was we were literally kind of in each other's orbits for quite a few years before we would actually meet. So we meet in Kuala Lumpur, but we're just like I'm just kind of, passing by basically, and we start to, just connect and have discussions. And at this point, he's going through a divorce. He's, and so we're just like connecting as like, oh yeah, you've been there, done that. Yeah, been there. Like we're just chatting as friends. Didn't realize that we're both speaking at an event in India a month later. And so that's when, that's when we started. We're like, you know what? Let's, give it a go. And, but I wasn't really, I was in this era of life where I'm like, I'm not going to, like, if we're supposed to be passing ships and learn from each other, great.
Yes.
And like there was no kind of like because he was all the way on that side of the world and he was going to be moving to San Diego and I was going to be moving to Singapore. So again, it was like, all
Wow.
right, well maybe we'll just kind of be.
Right.
And what happened was then we're like, oh, well, let's go to, I don't know, it was my birthday and we would like bump into each other in Nice. And so it was like we were just like ping-ponging like that for a year and a half. And then we
Wow.
realized that, okay, um, let's do this thing called love and marriage. And so in, a year later, we decided to buckle down and have a family in LA. And so I think when I said yes to love finally, and we both made the decision to say yes to love and even create a family, I think there were so many, like it was on such a soul level.
Yes.
And there were so many things that, we did kind of in prep for it because I think he was coming out of a relationship obviously before thinking that like okay, I'm not going to have any children. I don't know if I want to do this thing called marriage
Right.
because that's what happens when you first get out of it. And I was kind of like, all right, let me just travel the world because
Yes.
I mean in my youth I could never. And
Right.
so that was me in my era of I'm going to be writing my books and I had sold my practice. Funny enough, I had sold my dental practice in 2015. And, a few months later, that's when I met him again in the other part of the world. So it's like you let one chapter of your life go,
Yes.
and then at least, the universe for me had this other chapter waiting in another part of the world that I didn't even realize that I was going to be there. I was just kind of taking my eat pray love time, but I was also writing my very first book. So it was very, looking back, it was like, oh, the stars had something to do with that one because
Everything aligned.
and I tell women now and I tell girlfriends, because I think in the dating world it can be hard because you're on
It is.
apps and
Hmm.
and I've interviewed so many people who are trying to solve that issue with the apps and that and it's a tough place and I'm so grateful because I did do the apps for a little bit and it can be really sad and it can be really lonely. At least that was my experience of it.
Hmm.
Not, for everyone. But what I did do was I did give myself, you know, days and days and days of saying yes to people I wouldn't normally date and I wouldn't normally say yes to.
Mhm.
And for me, this was kind of an exercise in what can I learn about this person that
Right,
maybe I'm just judging on an app? Of course, like, because I think it's gone too far, right? With the swiping and everything, but it's just like intuitively, are they a good person?
right,
Like what is their character like?
right.
Do you smell red flags, right? Because our picker could be completely off.
Yes.
But that is my gift that I would give to any woman that is maybe thinking about dating again and just giving others the benefit because you just
Never know.
never know.
Hmm.
And, I think for me, because my guard was so down because we were all in this kind of spiritual community, we had all been through this like lived experience of this, retreat that
Right,
we were in A Fest, and then there was this like community that were all these amazing people that were kind of traveling around the world. And so you get close like that. And so for me, it was like, oh, I already know these people. We've traveled to different parts of the world. And so and for me, I was just friend zoning everybody
right.
until
I feel like
friends
that's where
told me,
I'm at right
like,
now.
yeah, it's like, the person that maybe knows you so well and can really love you for you and your soul is probably right under your nose
Hmm.
and you're not even, giving them um a chance because of whatever stuff that you have to kind of um release. So yeah, I would just say allow yourself to date and make the mistakes and get messy, but only for you to learn um the beauty and the magic that is out there because you're
Yes.
learning more and more about yourself. And I think that's the beauty of it.
Well,
Yeah.
I just think your story is so inspirational. Like I told you when I first started this podcast and I was researching inspirational women that I would like die to have as guests, you were one of them. And
Mhm.
the fact that we were able to make this work with you in Dubai and me out in the States is just, I feel very grateful, and I hope you can feel that and know that having you be a part of this and sharing your story and being transparent about, you know, the the yucky parts is important because I think so many women are embarrassed or shy away from talking about the yucky parts and they just want to keep brushing it under the rug. But I think until we work through the yucky parts, then we can't fully return to who we are as women.
Oh, agree. I think we need to normalize some of those not so fun parts because it isn't fun and it can be really dark and get really, scary where you have to be safe. And and I think the work that you're doing is so powerful
Thank
because
you.
you're creating such a safety net for women and to normalize the conversations. Like, I don't think I've shared a lot of these things that I've shared on your podcast today
Hmm.
with a lot of people because you just have to censor it
Yes.
for the masses because who
Hmm.
wants to hear about all of that? And the truth about that is, yeah, those ugly parts are kind of ugly and it's rough for some women who need to escape abuse. And you just hear so many crazy stories
Hmm.
of either it was too late or there's kids involved and things like that. And um but I think you're really shining the light on the realities of it and how we can
Yes.
support other women through the process.
Yes. And I have so many people say, Lauren, people don't want to hear the truth. Well, sorry. I'm very much a truth seeker, and I have been ever since I was little. And so I believe this podcast definitely, like you always say, when things align, they're meant to be. I was literally walking my dog one day, and the idea of this podcast came to me.
Mm,
And I will
yeah.
never forget that moment because, I just believe that things happen for a reason. And I know that this podcast idea fell into my lap for a reason. And it's because I have the gumption and I have the audacity to speak transparently and open and real about what women go through. so that they feel heard and seen and valued and supported in it.
Oh yeah, and and to rise above all of their circumstances when they're ready.
Yes.
And their now what chapter can be more beautiful and magical and grounded and peaceful, and they can rewire their nervous systems so
Mhm.
that they can tend for joy.
Yes. So, to conclude this conversation, I have one question that I've been dying to ask you.
Yeah.
What would you tell teenage Neeta or
Mm,
20 something year old Neeta now?
mm, mm. That keep going, and
Mm,
there's no rush. Keep going, sit in the feels. Everything's going to work out even more incredible and more amazing than you would ever anticipate, imagine, because you are so deserving.
I love that.
Yeah.
And to all the women that are watching, please, please go check out The Brave Table. Nita's the host of that amazing podcast, or check out her book, That Suck, Now What? Dr. Neeta Bhushan, thank you so much.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me, love.
HeyXies, it's your girl Lauren, and I just am here to say I appreciate all the love and support. And don't forget to hit like and subscribe so that the podcast can provide you with more valuable and meaningful work to support you on your journey.